Hello and welcome to the very next episode of the Reasonably Priced Campervan. And in this episode, what I'll be completing for the best part is removing this headliner, the shelf, so I can get behind it so that I can insulate just above this area and remove the remainder, the last piece of the electrical cabling that remains from what this was, which was of course an ex-BT Openreach van. Once that is completed, what I'll then be able to move into is the next step, which is to run my electrical cabling and start to finish the insulation of the walls and the ceiling ready for paneling. So let's get straight into it. So just done a little bit of a recce. So the first things that we'll have to do here is just under this portion of the trim there are two bolts there. There is a series of these trim clips dotted throughout this portion of the headliner. So I believe they just do pop off with a trim removal tool, so I have that sorted. You need to remove the hand guards or hand holders maybe as well, so they're just two bolts either side. Once you release these two clips to the side, it exposes them. Obviously there's another one towards the passenger side, and of course the sun visors towards the front. There is just a bolt there, two there, and then the same on the driver's side as well. So I'll get that started. I won't film the process. I'll literally just be clipping those, unbolting those, and then of course I need to clean up this shelf as well. So I'll get that sorted, and I'm just hoping that over the next maybe half an hour or so I should be able to take this down to expose the remainder of the cabling, remove this shelf, and then I can get some insulation applied just to the roof above this liner, ready for the final insulation, and possibly carpet. Not terribly decided. That's most likely where it's going to be. So I'll get that done, and then I'll come right back with an update. See you in a mo. Okay, so quick update. The handle to the driver's side has just been removed. It's quite a straightforward piece. They just unscrew under those two clips I showed you before. The sun visor as well, there's a total of 3 screws, and the plastic retainers which hold the visor up, they just pull out of those holes there. So I'm just going to get on and do the opposite side for the handle and the sun visor on the passenger side, and then I can see just from this light here that there are some little flathead sort of recesses which will just allow me to pop that off, which I'm sure will need to come away in order to bring this down. Once that's all ready and prepped, obviously the final remaining piece is to remove these clips which just pull down. I do have a trim removal piece, one second. So something that's commonly used and found is just a straightforward trim removal piece. I've got a bit of a set which is good for prying off bits of plastics and trim around various cars that I've had over the past. So I'll just drop that under there, and this will just pop off, and you can see here that there's a bit of cabling there, because ultimately I want the cabling that was once powering the various things across this panel. It was the interior lights in the back, it was the beacons that were on the roof, there was a boiler, the lift, and then there was a 230 volts emergency stop as well, which is like a master override. So I want all that cabling ripped out, because this is kind of what I was left with. This is just the remainder of some of it which still exists above between the shelf and the liner there. So I want all that out so that that's all clear, so that I can get up to this portion of the van here to fully insulate that. So in the next 10 minutes or so I'll be able to get that started. So I'll just finish off taking off the bits on the passenger side, and then removal of these clips, and then I'll bring you back for a subsequent update and see how we're getting on. So I'll be back shortly. Okay, so that's done. So headliner is down, and as you can see, this is the rear side of that yellow control panel, which has a whole heap of cabling running up to here. And just to give you some idea, this is all the cabling which was just literally hidden. Some of it was tucked away up into outside this channel, and some of it does actually still continue. So just working my way through and just wanted to strip out everything that's not necessary. And of course the bonus is that there's a lot of conduit here that I can reuse for my own purposes. I might even look at the cable. We'll have a look, but the conduit will definitely be useful for what I'm planning to do. So just going to move things on a little bit more, get everything stripped out that isn't necessary, in readiness for this shelf to come up. I'm not even sure at the moment how this shelf is held down, in all honesty. Just looking from the underside. Oh, there we go. So there's some screws. I think I can see 4. 1, 2, 3, 4 towards the front, and at the back I don't currently see them, but I'll have a proper route around. I'll come back to that. It might even give me enough space to get done what I think I wanted to do, because I just literally need to run some of this thermofoam, closed cell foam, over this panel, and I can actually get to this portion here on the underside. So I could probably get that sorted, and I may even just put a double skin towards this lower portion, because I could just carpet this side that's going to be visible. Obviously once this is all back, the headliner's put back up in place, I could just carpet this section, because this will be retained for storage in the end result. So with some trim coming around it, some people put doors on these, some people have just left them open just for storing of bigger items. I think for the time being at least I plan to just leave it open, because it's just quite a long space. We can put things like umbrellas, bigger items, rather than constrain that on a narrow opening. I think I'd rather leave that open. So that's the plan. So I'll move things along, I'll get the cabling sorted. I'm not going to do anything clever or fancy at the moment in terms of recarpeting this. Some people have coloured or covered the trim around the windows in Antara, or doing something quite nice with that, and that might be fine, but I can come back and do that much later. I don't think that's really critical. The front end of the cab I'm pretty much wishing to leave as best I can and leave that alone, because I've got so much to do back here, as I'm sure you appreciate. The jobs are stacking up and they're somewhat dependent on each other. I couldn't move on with the insulation, which I've already had arrive. I wanted to start putting the insulation in, but I can't do that because I've still got cabling in these conduits to above the roof here, and obviously this mess going on here. And so I can't do that, therefore I can't run my fresh cables that I wanted to run to this point where my battery setup's going to reside. So I'm just trying to get things done in as logical a sequence as I can. Things are starting to stack up in terms of the things that I've yet to do. So I'll finish this up. I'll come back with a final update. It's probably going to be a relatively short video today. It was just to cover off, because this was a BT Openreach van, that's just something that you have to deal with. There's a lot of cabling, but the possibilities of reuse is great, because as I said earlier, the conduit I can reuse, the cabling potentially I could reuse in some spots. But for all vans, you of course want to think about insulating above that area. Not everyone does it. I'm just figuring, well, why not? Because I needed to get this cabling out anyway, and I do have some excess 7mm foam that I can just whack up there, and then I'll come back and revisit that with a carpet at a later date. So it just makes sense. So just considerations of having an ex-commercial van. So I'm going to crack on and I'll come back with the final update for this video. Thank you. Okay, so the headliner's out, cables removed, got rid of all the garbage that was over here that I obviously don't require any longer, and also taken the shelf out. So the bolts that I showed you earlier towards the front, I think there was 4 of them. There was also 3 nuts that needed to be removed from these protruding bolts. I think they were just 10 mil, so quick socket on those to undo them. The shelf just came right off. So all I need to do now really is just turn my attention back to here. So obviously I can gain access to this full panel now. So I'm just gonna, obviously you can see I've already put a little bit of sound deadening on. I did that prior when I could just reach over. I'm not going to bother putting any more on there. I'm just going to line this with the 7 mil insulation from top to bottom, front to back, and then obviously side to side. So that's going to be lined, possibly carpeted later, but I think I'm just going to keep that accessible till that's done, because I may also put some recycled plastic insulation on here behind the carpet. So not too sure on that yet, but I'm in no rush to get this back up there, because at the end of the day there's a few bits to do, and I just don't need it back up unless I just wanted it out of the way. But obviously I've taken the cables that ran from the back of the switches on the headliner. They were never intended to be used. I will just keep the switch in just as a kind of like a tribute to what the van used to be, an ex-BT Openreach. I may make a new sticker for the yellow panel there, not too sure yet, or indeed I'll certainly ask my wife to do that. She has a Cricut machine. So moving on, I'll just pause the video here. I'll get the insulation out of the shed and I'll just get that lined, and I'll be back with a momentary update. See you shortly. And there we have it. So now fully lined just above the headspace. So there's obviously some support sections here, so I did put some insulation behind them. They'll obviously be filled with recycled plastic ahead of the next pieces going in, so that will be done. Probably just put another final piece just down there just to close that off. Obviously did that a little bit more on this side, same goes, that will be filled. And then what I'm going to do, as I said, I'll probably just leave this as it is for a bit, because what I'm thinking of doing is, as I said, putting the insulation in, but possibly carpeting this front as well, because that will be visible once the shelf is back in, and obviously it'll add a touch of some warm properties as well, just for a bit more of a protection from the elements, from the cold escaping or the cold penetrating coming in rather. So yeah, so that concludes this video. It's a quite a short one today, but it was just something I was keen to get done, because the cabling that I've removed, as you can see, I've got quite a growing pile of electrics and cables there that I'll probably strip, remove the conduit, and then figure out if I'm going to reuse any of that cabling. I do have my own cabling already for some of the runs that I'm going to run or do, and I do just have a little bit of tidying up to do. So I will leave the video here. If this channel and the content I'm producing is of interest, do please like the videos, hit the subscribe, and there'll be more videos coming. So in the next episode, what I propose to be doing is probably parking this section of the van for the time being, but probably what I'll be starting to do is running my cables and getting the insulation down ready for the battening, which then means I can subsequently start to move on to the panelling of the van. So that'll be a huge step forward, and it'll start to look more like a camper van rather than a spaceship as it does in here right now. So with that all being said, that concludes this video. Hope you've enjoyed the content. Look forward to seeing you again. Bye bye.